I had just returned from an 8-month deployment when I rushed into the intensive care unit and found my father dying alone beneath the cold lights. Meanwhile, my stepmother was raising a glass of champagne on a yacht, using his money to pay for the party. When I stopped the first transfer, she called me screaming, but what else had she been hiding from me? I came home too late. 1 hour after I made the call, my stepmother screamed so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Behind me, my father lay motionless beneath the cold lights of the intensive care unit. His lips were cracked. His skin looked gray against the pillow. There was no hearing aid beside him, no reading glasses, no family photograph, nothing that suggested anyone expected him to wake up. On my phone screen, Vanessa stood under bright Florida sun with champagne in one hand. Music thudded behind her. Sophie leaned into the frame, laughing. Vanessa demanded to know what I had done. I looked at my father, then back at her. At that moment, I believed I had stopped only one suspicious transfer. I did not know I had touched the smallest part of what they had done to him. 5 hours earlier, I had stepped off a military transport in Norfolk after 8 months at sea. Families crowded the arrival area, children ran beneath the ropes, spouses held signs and flowers. One sailor beside me dropped his bag and wrapped both arms around his wife. I had one duffel bag, a phone full of work messages, and no one waiting. That had been my choice, or so I had told myself for years. I was halfway to baggage claim when my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. The woman asked whether I was Henry Reed's daughter. Something in her voice made me stop. She was a nurse at Harbor Point Medical Center. My father had been admitted 6 days earlier. His condition had worsened overnight. The hospital had been told that his wife was the only person authorized to receive information. Then she paused. Vanessa had also told them that my father and I no longer had a relationship. The hospital found my number in an old emergency contact form. For a few seconds, the terminal kept moving around me while I stood still. 6 days, Dad had been in a hospital less than 30 minutes away, and no one had called me. I asked whether he was conscious. Not consistently, she said. I asked whether Vanessa was there. Another pause. No. I remember the humid air outside. I remember the handle of my duffel digging into my palm. I remember giving the cab driver the hospital address twice because my voice did not sound like mine. On the drive, I thought about the last time I spoke to Dad. 3 months earlier, during a short satellite call, he asked when I was coming home. Before I could answer, Vanessa took the phone and said he was tired. When I asked whether something was wrong, she said it was age, nothing more. I accepted that answer. When you live far from family long enough, you learn to accept short answers, not because they make sense, but because one more question can open a door you are not ready to enter. That was the part I had to admit. Vanessa had kept me away. But I had made it easy for her. The intensive care unit smelled like bleach, warm plastic, and old coffee. A nurse led me to the last room on the left. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. His hands had once covered half a drafting table. Now one rested outside the blanket, bruised where an intravenous line had been moved. I took it carefully. His fingers were cold. The nurse said Vanessa had not visited in several days. She had called, but not to ask whether Dad was in pain or knew where he was. She asked when he could be discharged. She asked whether he could still sign documents. She asked whether the hospital could confirm he was mentally alert. The nurse did not need to say more. There were no clean clothes, no shaving kit, no slippers, no family pictures. A palliative care invoice sat unpaid in a plastic folder near the window. Dad's phone was turned off inside a clear belongings bag. I opened social media and found Vanessa's latest post. She and Sophie were on a yacht off Fort Lauderdale. The caption said they were taking time to heal. Dad was still alive. I stared until the words stopped looking real. I wanted to save him. I also wanted him to explain why he had stayed silent every time Vanessa pushed me farther out of the family. Both feelings were true. Wanting to protect him did not erase what he had allowed. I was there because leaving him alone was wrong, not because the past had suddenly become clean. The nurse handed me his belongings bag. Inside, there was no wallet, no bank card, no house key. My phone lit up with another photo from the yacht. Vanessa and Sophie raised their glasses toward the camera. I pressed the video call button. The music reached me first. Then Sophie's face appeared. She saw me. She looked past my shoulder at the hospital bed, and she smiled as if both of us had arrived late to a race only she knew had begun. The call from the yacht ben. The music reached me before Sophie said a word. Behind her, sunlight flashed across the water. Someone laughed near a tray of champagne. Sophie steadied herself with one hand, while the other held my father's black credit card. Behind me, the monitor beside Dad's bed kept its slow rhythm. A nurse adjusted the line in his arm. Dad pulled in a shallow breath, then another. Sophie looked past me at the hospital bed and smiled. She said I had picked an interesting time to come home. Then Vanessa took the phone. She did not look surprised to see Dad in intensive care. She did not ask what had happened overnight or whether he had opened his eyes. Instead, she said I had no right to appear after years away and start making demands. I had chosen the Navy over my family, she told me. Now I was looking at a wealthy man near the end of his life and seeing an inheritance. I let her finish. When was the last time you saw him? For the first time, her expression changed. She said she had cared for him for months. She said I did not understand that pressure. Dr. Hale had told her Dad was stable when she left, and she deserved a few days to recover. None of that answered my question. When was the last time you saw him? Vanessa glanced away. She repeated that she had handled his medications, appointments, meals, and paperwork. She said I was in no position to judge her, but she never gave me a day. People who sit beside someone they love usually remember the last time they touched their hand. They remember the hour they left. They remember the final thing they said. Vanessa remembered none of it. Sophie interrupted from beside her. She told Vanessa not to worry because everything would be finished by that afternoon. The words were casual, too casual. Vanessa turned and told her to be quiet. I ended the call. I stood beside Dad's bed and listened to the monitor. I did not feel calm, but I knew how to act calm. There is a difference. Silence had given Vanessa room to reveal more than she intended. I opened Dad's old email account on his phone. The battery was nearly dead, and the screen was crowded with unread messages. One subject line stopped me. Transfer authorization pending. The message had been sent that morning. A large amount of money was scheduled to move from Dad's investment trust into a consulting company owned by Derek Sloan. I recognized the name. Derek had handled part of Dad's retirement planning. The transfer required confirmation before the close of business. Dad could barely breathe without help. I did not have authority to move his money. I could not call and take control of his accounts. My rank did not change that, and I did not want it to. So I reported suspected financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I explained that Dad was in intensive care and could not confirm a major transaction. I sent a photograph of the hospital admission page and asked for the fraud department. The hospital social worker documented that Vanessa, Dad's medical representative, had been absent while asking questions about his ability to sign documents. The bank placed a temporary hold on the transfer. They also locked online access to Dad's accounts and flagged related activity for review. That was all. I had not frozen Vanessa's personal fortune. I had only stopped money connected to Dad from moving long enough for someone to ask whether he had approved it. 1 hour later, Vanessa called. The music was gone. She shouted that her card had been declined when the yacht company tried to settle part of the bill. She said a transfer had been blocked and accused me of interfering with marital property. Then she threatened to sue me. She said she would contact my command and tell them I had come home unstable, angry, and out of control. I waited until she ran out of breath. "Come home. Your husband is dying." There was a brief silence. She did not ask whether Dad was still alive. She asked what I had told the bank. People often think greed reveals itself in what someone demands. Sometimes it reveals itself in what they forget to ask. Vanessa asked about the card, the transfer, and her attorney. She never asked whether Dad was conscious. A few minutes later, Naomi Price called me back. She was an estate attorney whose number I found in one of Dad's older emails. She had already spoken with the bank. "You bought us 72 hours," she said. "Not a victory, 72 hours." I looked at the clock above Dad's bed. 3 days sounded like a long time, until the only person who could explain the truth was dying right in front of you. 72 hours, Naomi repeated. The clock above Dad's bed showed a little after 9. For the first time in my life, 3 days felt shorter than a breath. Naomi explained what we needed. First, proof that Dad may not have understood the documents he signed. Second, proof that the money leaving his accounts was not being used for his care. Third, proof that more assets could disappear if no one stepped in. Feelings would not be enough. We needed records. I pulled a legal pad from the nurse's station and began building a timeline. The date Dad entered the hospital. The morning the transfer was scheduled, the dates attached to recent signatures, his medication hours, the day Vanessa left Virginia, every call that had been blocked or ignored. I was not an investigator, but years in the Supply Corps had taught me how to study a sequence and notice when one number did not belong. Every system leaves a trail when something moves. Money does too. The hospital social worker met me near the elevators. Vanessa had asked the hospital to mark my name as restricted. She claimed Dad did not want me receiving updates. The nursing notes said otherwise. During brief periods of awareness, Dad had spoken my name more than once. One nurse wrote that he asked whether his daughter had been called. Another noted that he became agitated when no one answered him. Vanessa had also missed 2 care meetings. Several bills connected to pain management had not been paid. There had even been a request to move Dad to a private facility, although his doctors had not believed it was medically necessary. I wrote everything down. Then Dad opened his eyes. At first, he stared at the ceiling. His gaze moved slowly toward me, and for one terrible second, I was not sure he knew who I was. Then his fingers moved inside mine. "You came," he whispered. I had changed out of my uniform. I wore plain slacks and a gray sweater from my travel bag. Maybe that helped him see his daughter instead of the officer I had become far away from him. He tried to apologize. The words came apart between breaths. I thought keeping quiet would keep the peace. I knew what he meant. For years, Vanessa had complained and demanded until everyone around her gave in. Dad had called that peace. He avoided arguments by letting the quiet person absorb the damage. That person had been me. "You kept the peace with her," I said. "I paid for it." His eyes closed. The sentence hurt him. It hurt me too, but I did not want our last honest moment built on another lie. After a while, he looked at me again. There was fear in his face, but also relief. I did not tell him I forgave him. Forgiveness was too large for that room, and we did not have enough time to pretend otherwise. I leaned closer. "I'm here, Dad. You don't have to fix all of it tonight." His hand trembled against the blanket. He lifted one finger and traced a small rectangle in the air. "The blue drawer." I asked which room. His lips moved again. "Don't let her tell my story." I asked what was inside. I asked whether it was in his office or the old drafting room. He could not answer. The monitor changed before anyone said a word. A nurse stepped into the room and looked at the screen. Dad's fingers loosened around mine. The warmth left his hand so slowly that I kept holding it after I understood. The doctor spoke a few minutes later. I had already heard the answer in the silence. I used to believe death would settle my feelings. I thought I would either forgive Dad or remain angry forever. Instead, I learned that grief can stand beside anger without canceling it. I could mourn the man who died and still ache for the child he failed to protect. Both were true. Before the nurse removed the lines, Vanessa demanded that I be denied access to Dad's records. An email from her attorney arrived soon after, warning me not to enter the house or interfere with the estate. The transfer remained on temporary hold. The 72-hour clock kept moving. Legal systems do not stop because someone has died. Banks do not wait for families to finish grieving. Paperwork continues, even when the person at the center of it is lying beneath a white sheet. Naomi said we could ask the court for supervised access to preserve Dad's files. Then she learned Vanessa had already changed the locks. In my pocket, I carried a hospital note with 3 words written across it: the blue drawer. I did not know whether it held evidence, a confession, or only the last memory of a man afraid someone else would erase him from his own life. Before I tell you what I found inside that house, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always find it incredible that one story can reach people in so many different places at the same moment. The blue drawer was somewhere behind the locked front door of the house where I had grown up. The next morning, I stood outside with Naomi, a locksmith, and an officer assigned to keep the peace. Naomi recorded the entry, so every document we touched could be preserved. I had waited years to step into that house again. I was not going to let one angry minute turn me into an intruder in my own family's story. The locksmith opened the door without damaging the frame. Inside, the house looked polished and unfamiliar. The photographs of my mother were gone. So were most of Dad's architectural sketches. In their place hung decorative prints with no connection to the people who had lived there. My old bedroom had become Sophie's dressing room. Racks of clothes stood where my desk had once been. Mirrors covered the wall where Dad had marked my height in pencil. In the hallway, boxes carried auction labels. Some held family albums, blueprints, and books from Dad's office. On the dining room table sat a property valuation report. Vanessa had not only been spending his money, she had been preparing to remove every trace of the family that existed before her. Dad's drafting room was at the back of the house. The door stuck halfway, just as it had when I was young. I pushed with my shoulder, and the smell of wood, paper, and graphite came back so quickly that I had to stop. For a moment, I could see him at the old table while I colored on the floor. The flat file cabinet still stood beneath the window. Most of its drawers were gray. One was blue. I had chosen that color when I was 8 because Dad let me paint one drawer myself. The paint had dried unevenly, leaving a ridge near the handle. My finger found that same ridge. The drawer was locked, but the locksmith opened it in less than a minute. Inside was a waterproof envelope. Naomi photographed it before I touched anything. We found a flash drive, bank statements marked in pencil, a handwritten list of dates, a business card from a private care center in Chesapeake, and a sealed letter with my name on it. Beneath the letter lay my mother's pearl hair clip. I had not seen it since I was 12. She used to wear it on Sunday mornings. I remembered sitting on her bed while she pinned her hair and asked whether the pearls made her look too formal. I always told her no. I held the clip in my palm and felt something inside me soften. Then I opened the letter. Dad's handwriting was unsteady, but recognizable. He wrote that he had spent years avoiding conflict because he told himself he was protecting the family. Then came the line that stopped me. I kept choosing the person who made the most noise because I believed the quiet one would always understand. I read it twice. Dad had mistaken my silence for endless endurance. Families do that more often than they admit. They hurt the person who reacts the least, then call the arrangement peaceful. The letter did not ask me to forget or pretend he had always been a good father. It only admitted that he knew the difference now. We copied the flash drive onto a secured laptop without altering the original. The video opened with Dad, seated in his study. He looked exhausted. It had been recorded 3 weeks before his hospitalization. He said Vanessa and Dr. Hale sometimes woke him early or late with papers to sign. He had been told they were medical forms, insurance updates, or routine trust documents. Sometimes he could not remember whether he was at home or at a care facility. He said Vanessa told him I did not want to speak with him. Then he said money was leaving, but he did not know where it was going. The video ended when he began coughing and reached toward the screen. There was no full confession, no clear accusation, only fragments from a tired man who knew something was wrong and no longer trusted his own memory. Dad had left me a door. He had not been able to walk me through it. The handwritten list contained more than a dozen dates. Most had no explanation. One appeared 3 times. It matched a bank statement, a property transfer, and an invoice from the private care center in Chesapeake. I circled it. Naomi was studying the page when her phone rang. Vanessa had announced a public memorial service for the following afternoon. Local reporters had been invited. Her post described me as an estranged daughter who had abandoned her family to pursue a military career. I looked back at the blue drawer, the letter, and the pearl clip beside my hand. Vanessa did not only want Dad's assets, she wanted the power to decide how everyone would remember him and who would carry the blame now that he could no longer speak. The perfect widow Vanessa did not wait for the truth to catch up with her. By the next afternoon, she had already built a cleaner version of my father's life. The memorial was held at a church in Virginia Beach, inside the community hall Dad had helped design. He once told me the room mattered because people needed a place to sit together after the formal words were over. That day, every detail had been arranged for a camera. Large wedding photographs stood near the entrance. A screen played clips from cruises, charity dinners, and beach vacations. Sophie managed a live stream from the front row while a hired videographer moved through the crowd. Beside the guest book sat a donation table for a new memorial fund, controlled by Vanessa. There were almost no photographs of my mother. There were none of me as a child. It was not a memorial to Dad's whole life. It was an edited version, built to begin on the day Vanessa entered it. People approached me before the service. Most were not cruel. That almost made it worse. One woman said Dad had missed me terribly. A former client told me Vanessa had carried the burden alone. Another man said, military service was honorable, but family should still come first. Each sentence was wrapped in sympathy. Each one carried a judgment. I had been gone. That part was true. Work had given me distance, and sometimes I had used it because it was easier than asking why Dad never defended me. But they knew only the version Vanessa had repeated after pushing everyone else out. Reputation is not always built from truth. Sometimes it is built by the person who stays in the room longest after everyone else has been removed. When the service began, Vanessa stood behind the lectern with a folded handkerchief. She spoke about sacrifice, the appointments she had managed, and the years she had devoted to caring for her husband. Then she spoke about his final decisions. She said Dad had remained clear-minded until the end. She said every financial change had been his choice. She said he had accepted that his daughter no longer wanted to come home. She never used my name. She did not need to. Heads turned toward me anyway. I felt the old instinct rise inside me. Explain, defend, make them understand. Then I remembered the nursing notes and the video. Vanessa was tying herself, in public, to a story the records could test, so I stayed seated. After the service, Sophie stepped close with her phone raised. The red live stream symbol glowed at the top of the screen. She asked whether I regretted abandoning my father. The question was not meant for me. It was meant for the people watching. Today is about my father, I said. I'm not doing this here. Her smile tightened. She wanted anger. Anger would have fit the story they had already told. I gave her nothing she could use. Outside, Naomi asked why I was not answering the accusations online. She said we could release a short statement. I don't need to win the internet, I told her. I need the court to read the records. That was when I noticed Gloria sitting alone near the back steps. She had cared for me after my mother died. She was not related to us, and she had nothing to gain. Still, she had come. Gloria told me Dad called her several weeks before the hospital. He asked whether I had truly refused to speak with him. Vanessa had told him I wanted no contact. Gloria said Vanessa stopped returning her calls and once refused to let her into the house. During their last conversation, Dad admitted he could not remember several papers he had signed. Gloria did not have bank records or legal authority. What she had was a memory of how the isolation happened. Your father loved you, she said quietly. He also failed you. Both things can be true. For the first time that day, I did not feel the need to explain myself. The relief lasted less than 10 minutes. In the parking lot, Naomi received a filing from Vanessa's attorney. They claimed I was unstable after deployment, obsessed with Dad's estate, and using my military position to pressure the bank. They wanted the court to keep me away from the records and from any role in the estate. Vanessa had taken the part of my life I had worked hardest to manage and turned it into a weapon. Then Lena Ortiz called. She was the forensic accountant Naomi had hired to review the dates from the blue drawer. Lena said there was a 72-hour gap in Dad's official medical history. For 3 days, he had disappeared from the hospital record. I had thought the worst thing was learning that my father died alone. Then I discovered there were 3 days before his final admission that no one wanted to admit where he had been. The days that didn't exist. Lena did not start with the money. She started with movement. A private ambulance invoice showed that Dad had been taken from his house to a recovery center in Chesapeake 3 days before his final hospital admission. The facility called itself a restorative retreat. In practice, it provided basic monitoring and allowed selected visitors to come and go with little oversight. Lena compared the ambulance bill with credit card activity, electronic signature times, notary records, medication logs, nursing notes, Dad's phone data, and the facility's entry records. The same 3 days appeared everywhere. They were missing only from the story Vanessa had told. Dad had not been resting at home. He had been placed in a private room where Vanessa controlled who could see him, what phone he could use, and which visitors were allowed through the door. During those 72 hours, 3 properties were transferred into a new trust. The beneficiary on Dad's life insurance policy was changed from me to Sophie. One investment account was given authority to pay directly to Vanessa. Derek's company received a large restructuring fee that same day. Dr. Hale signed a statement confirming that Dad understood the value of his assets, knew what he was signing, and was not impaired by medication. Not everything had been taken. Part of the estate was still protected by older agreements, which explained why Vanessa kept fighting. She had already gained enough to change her life. She wanted the rest before anyone stopped her. Then Lena found the 8-minute gap. Dr. Hale's statement was signed at 8:12 that morning. It said Dad knew where he was. It said he understood the documents. It said he could explain his wishes. A nursing note was entered at 8:20. Dad could not name the month. He asked whether breakfast was coming, even though he had already eaten. He fell asleep while speaking. He repeatedly asked whether anyone had called his daughter. 8 minutes. On one page, he was capable of moving houses, insurance, and investments. On the next, he could not remember breakfast. Naomi placed both records side by side. She did not need to explain the difference. Someone had counted on no one comparing them. Lena also found a former nursing assistant who had worked there. The woman agreed to speak by phone, but she was frightened. She had started a new job and did not want her name tied to a legal fight involving a doctor. She remembered Vanessa asking whether Dad could receive something stronger before Derek arrived. Dr. Hale usually stayed only a few minutes. Once the nurse saw Dad push a stack of papers away. He said he wanted to call his daughter. After that, his phone disappeared. The nurse had not read the documents. She could not say what anyone signed or why, and she was not ready to testify. I understood her fear. People imagine witnesses step forward because truth is enough. Real people have rent, children, jobs, and reputations. Knowing something happened does not make the cost of speaking disappear. Still, her memory gave shape to the records. Vanessa had not only moved money, she had controlled who could sit beside Dad. She had blocked his calls. She had placed papers in front of him when he could not understand them. Then she built a public story about choices he may never have made. Money can be traced. A house can be returned, but no court can give back the hours when someone was kept from the people they wanted near them. That was the part I could not stop thinking about. I had begun this fight because I felt guilty for being gone. By then, guilt was no longer enough to explain what I was doing. I wanted to protect what remained. I wanted the record to show that Dad's choices had been taken from him, and I wanted Vanessa to stop using my grief and military service to distract everyone from what happened in that room. Late that afternoon, Naomi received notice of an emergency hearing. Vanessa's attorney planned to argue that I was acting out of grief, that deployment had left me controlling and unstable, and that I had used my rank to pressure the bank. They would say Dad chose not to see me. They would point to Dr. Hale's signature and call the documents valid. My uniform hung in a garment bag at the hotel. For a moment, I considered wearing it. Then I closed the bag. I did not want the judge to believe me because of the ribbons on my chest. I wanted her to believe the numbers, the signatures, and the notes no one could order to change. Naomi placed 2 folders on the table. One said Dad was fully capable. The other said he did not know the date. Both had been created on the same morning. 18 hours later, one version of my father would begin to collapse in court. Vanessa believed the person who spoke louder would be believed. I walked into that hearing with a different plan. I would let her speak first. The first hearing, the 2 folders stayed on the table until sunrise. One said Dad had been fully capable of making financial decisions. The other said he did not know the month. Both had been created on the same morning. I reached the courthouse before the doors opened. My uniform was still hanging in the hotel room. That morning, I needed to know whether the truth could stand without any symbol of authority protecting it. Vanessa arrived with Sophie, Derek, and Dr. Hale. Sophie kept her phone low, filming enough to make it look as though I had dragged a grieving widow into court. Their attorney described Vanessa as the woman who had cared for Dad for years. He reminded the judge that I rarely came home. He said I appeared only when Dad was dying, then used my military position to pressure a bank. He claimed the hold left Vanessa unable to pay bills or funeral costs. Then he introduced an email I had sent Dad during deployment. It was private. In it, I admitted that I had not been sleeping after an accident aboard ship. I said I felt exhausted and was meeting with a counselor because I did not want stress making decisions for me. Vanessa's attorney called that instability. He suggested I was paranoid and using the estate to redirect anger from my deployment. My first instinct was to stand. Naomi placed one hand on the folder in front of me. I stayed seated. When I was younger, I thought the hardest part of asking for help was admitting that I needed it. That morning, I learned something crueler. Some people will wait for you to speak honestly about your pain, then keep those words like a knife for the moment they need to wound you. Naomi answered without raising her voice. The email was not a diagnosis. Seeking counseling was responsible, and I had completed my assignment without restriction. Nothing suggested I lacked judgment or legal capacity. More important, my stress had nothing to do with Dad's ability to understand the documents placed before him. Then Naomi asked how Vanessa obtained the email. The answer changed twice. First, they said it was saved on Dad's computer. Then they said Vanessa found a printed copy. The judge asked whether anyone had permission to access his account after he entered the hospital. No one gave a clear answer. I thought that would be the worst part. I was wrong. Vanessa's attorney produced a notarized letter, supposedly written by Dad 6 weeks before his death. The letter said he did not want me involved in his care. It said I had chosen the Navy over my family. It gave Vanessa full control over every financial decision and said I should have no role in the estate or memorial. Vanessa looked directly at me while it was read. Sophie smiled. For several seconds, I heard only my breathing. Dad's final words came back to me. The blue drawer. Do not let her tell my story. Then the letter made me doubt even that. Money was not the only thing they wanted. They wanted my last memory of him. They wanted to replace his hand in mine with a page that made me wonder whether he had wanted me there at all. Naomi asked for the signing date. It fell inside the missing 72 hours. On that same day, Dad could not identify the month. The notary worked under contract for Derek's company. There was no video, no independent witness, and the signature appeared guided. Several phrases also matched language from Vanessa's emails. Naomi did not call it a forgery. She showed how carefully it had been created away from anyone who might challenge it. Then she presented the nursing notes, medication record, Dad's calls, the transfers, the yacht charges, and the video where he admitted he did not remember what he had signed. The judge did not declare anyone guilty. She said there was enough evidence to question whether Dad's assets and final wishes had been manipulated. Vanessa was removed from control of the estate. The transfers remained frozen. No records could be moved or destroyed. A neutral administrator was appointed, and the court ordered the care center, Dr. Hale, and Derek to surrender their files. Vanessa leaned toward Sophie. She thinks she won. I heard her. I did not answer. This was not victory. It was the first time she no longer controlled every door. Outside the courtroom, my phone vibrated. The camera at Dad's house showed someone entering the old garage code. It was Sophie. The court had just ordered everyone to preserve Dad's records. Less than 40 minutes later, she walked into the house to find the thing her mother feared most. If you are still listening, please leave a comment below and tell me how satisfied you are with the story so far. It helps me know that there are still people walking beside me through this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement I have to keep telling you how the final chapter unfolds. The break-in. Less than 40 minutes after the judge ordered everyone to preserve Dad's records, Sophie entered the old garage code. My phone showed the alert while Naomi and I were still leaving the courthouse parking lot. The camera feed opened on Sophie stepping through the side door. She wore gloves, a large canvas bag hung from one shoulder, and a small hammer rested against her hip. She did not look through the kitchen or go upstairs for clothes. She walked straight toward Dad's drafting room. I pulled to the side of the road and called the police. Then I contacted the neutral estate administrator and sent Naomi the live feed. I did not turn the car around. A younger version of me would have believed courage meant driving back as fast as possible and stopping her with my own hands. The Navy taught me something harder. Courage can mean knowing that your anger will make a dangerous situation worse, then choosing not to obey it. Sophie reached the flat file cabinet and yanked open every drawer. Through the camera microphone, I heard her speaking to Vanessa on the phone. She asked where the flash drive was. She complained that the office had already been inventoried. Then she said, "If that drive disappears, they have nothing but the word of a dead man." The camera recorded every word. She tore through filing cabinets, opened blueprint tubes, dumped storage boxes onto the floor, and pulled cables from Dad's old computer. She searched the blue drawer twice. What she did not know was that the original flash drive was already sealed with Naomi, and a forensic copy had been preserved. A few minutes later, Derek's car appeared in the driveway. He stayed outside and called Sophie from near the front steps. Part of the conversation came through the open office door. He told her not to touch the tax files. He said to take the black drive and leave everything else. Then he added that Vanessa should never have allowed the court to hear about those dates. That changed everything. Sophie could claim she was angry and looking for family property. Derek's instructions showed something organized. They were not taking random belongings. They were searching for a specific device after a court order told them not to remove anything. Sophie found the black external drive behind a stack of old project ledgers. When she pulled it free, a small velvet pouch fell from the shelf. My mother's pearl hair clip landed on the floor. Sophie recognized it. She had seen me holding it during the inventory. She stared at it for a moment, then said, "All this over a dead woman's jewelry." She threw it down. The first pearl cracked against the hardwood. Then she stepped on it again. The sound came through my phone speaker, small and sharp. I had watched numbers leave Dad's accounts without losing control. I had sat in court while strangers read my private words aloud. But when I heard those pearls break, I had to close my eyes and grip the steering wheel. Money was what they had taken from Dad. The hair clip was what they wanted to take from me. I wanted to call Sophie. I wanted her to know I was watching. I wanted to stop the next step before it happened. I did none of those things. I let the camera keep recording. That choice felt cold in the moment. Later, I understood it was the first time I had refused to trade lasting proof for immediate relief. Sophie shoved the black drive into her bag and ran toward the back door. Derek returned to his car, but a patrol vehicle blocked the driveway before he could leave. Both were detained for questioning. The police recovered the drive, the gloves, the hammer, and Sophie's bag. The estate administrator confirmed that neither of them had permission to enter the house. Derek insisted he had come to retrieve personal property. The label on the drive carried the name of Dad's architecture firm. The camera files were copied. The call inside the house was preserved. So was the moment Sophie destroyed the hair clip. Vanessa posted her version online before the police had finished taking statements. She claimed Sophie had returned for personal belongings. She accused me of using cameras to spy on family members and using the Navy to pressure local police. I did not answer. Naomi sent a preservation notice for the post instead. Its timing showed that Vanessa knew about the entry almost immediately. By evening, a technician had begun a preliminary review of the recovered drive. One folder did not contain Dad's name. It belonged to a man who had died 7 years earlier. I thought I was investigating the final months of my father's life. The drive showed that Vanessa had practiced this on another family long before she ever met ours. The husband before my father, Gan. The name on the recovered drive belonged to a man named Robert Mercer. He had died 7 years earlier. At first, I expected the files to lead to something larger, a network. Dozens of victims, people moving money across state lines under different names. The truth was smaller. That made it worse. There was Vanessa, there was Derek, there was Dr. Hale. 3 ordinary people had found one vulnerable family, learned what worked, and tried it again. They did not need to be criminal masterminds. They only needed a wealthy man who was sick, lonely, and separated from his children by old resentment. What frightened me most was not a perfect conspiracy. It was the possibility that 3 people had simply noticed a family was too ashamed, too exhausted, and too divided to compare notes. Robert's daughter agreed to meet me at a small diner outside Richmond. She chose a booth near the back, away from the windows. Her name was Emily Mercer. She arrived carrying a worn accordion folder held together with a rubber band. There were emails from her father, copies of his old will and the replacement, medication records, a letter from Vanessa's former attorney, invoices from Derek's company, and a medical note with Dr. Hale's name written across the top. Emily did not begin with the documents. She began with an apology. She said she had known my father later married Vanessa. For years, she had wondered whether he was safe, but she had never contacted him. Then she looked at me and said, "I wondered who would be next." That sentence settled between us. Dad had not been an accident. He had been the second attempt. Emily's father owned several commercial properties and lived alone after his first wife died. His children were scattered across 3 states. Vanessa entered his life during a long recovery from heart surgery. Within a year, she controlled his appointments, his phone, and the list of people allowed into the house. Derek reorganized his accounts. Dr. Hale signed a statement saying Robert understood every change. His will was replaced while he was taking strong pain medication. After his death, Vanessa told friends that his children had abandoned him and returned only for money. I had heard the same story at Dad's memorial. The words were almost identical. Emily's family tried to challenge the will, but the legal bills grew faster than they could manage. Her brothers disagreed about how far to go. One wanted to settle, another stopped answering calls. Vanessa offered them money in exchange for silence. They took it. Emily's voice dropped when she admitted that. She said they were tired of being called greedy. Their father was dead. Every public argument made them feel as though they were helping strangers tear apart what remained of him. She had feared the questions more than the loss. Why did you not notice sooner? Why did you let her isolate him? Why did you not call more often? Why did you accept the settlement? I understood every one of those questions because I had already asked them of myself. People who manipulate families do not rely only on lies, they rely on shame. They know the victims will spend so much time blaming themselves that they may never turn toward the person who created the damage. Sitting across from Emily, I felt part of my own guilt loosen. I had missed signs. So had she, but the distance between us and our fathers had not been an open door anyone had the right to exploit. Emily pushed the folder toward me. She agreed to give the records to the investigators. She would let them review the old settlement and confirm that Derek and Dr. Hale had been involved. She was willing to testify about the pattern. Not for money. Too much time had passed for several claims, and she knew she might never recover anything. She did it because she did not want there to be a third family. By the time I left the diner, the case no longer belonged only to Dad and me. Our silence could protect the people who hurt us, or it could end with us. That evening, Naomi called. Vanessa wanted to negotiate. She offered to give up part of her claim to the estate and stop fighting the neutral administrator. In return, I had to release one frozen account and agree not to cooperate with any criminal investigation. Naomi said what both of us understood. This was no longer a family settlement. Vanessa was trying to buy silence. I agreed to meet her. Not to forgive her. Not to bargain away the truth. The meeting would be recorded legally, under the guidance of the investigator. For the first time since I came home, Vanessa believed she was about to purchase control again. I let her believe it. The offer journey. The meeting took place in a conference room at Naomi's office, far from the house, the courthouse, and every place where Vanessa had learned how to control a room. Before she arrived, the investigator went over the rules one more time. I could not threaten her. I could not lie about evidence, I could not promise immunity, and I could not push her into saying anything she did not choose to say. My job was simple. Ask questions, listen, let her fill the silence. I brought a blank notebook and set it on the table. I did not open it. I used to think the only way to make someone tell the truth was to show them how much you already knew. Later I learned that arrogant people often say the most when they believe you know very little. Vanessa arrived with her attorney, but he waited in another room while she spoke with me. She wanted the meeting to feel personal. She still believed family history gave her an advantage. She sat across from me and placed a typed agreement on the table. Under her offer, I could keep the house. She would keep the investment account and the insurance proceeds. Neither side would make public statements. I would withdraw anything connected to Robert Mercer, and Sophie would face no further action over the break-in. Vanessa called it my last chance to protect Dad's dignity. I looked at the agreement, then at her. Did Dad know the house was being transferred? She leaned back. He did not need every detail. That was the first crack. I asked who explained the papers to him. She said Derek prepared them. I asked who chose the day they were signed. She said the timing was based on availability. I asked why they used the care facility instead of Dad's attorney's office. She said moving him would have been difficult. I asked why no one called me. Her mouth tightened. She said Dad did not want me involved. I asked who decided he was capable of signing. Dr. Hale cleared him. I asked whether Dad read every page. Vanessa said that was unnecessary. Derek had summarized the important parts, and Dad was too tired to argue over language he had already approved. Each answer moved her farther from the careful story she had told in court. I kept my voice even. Was he awake before the documents arrived? Vanessa reached for the glass of water beside her. Martin made sure he was calm before Derek came in. She stopped with the glass halfway to her mouth. For the first time, she seemed to hear her own words. She had used Dr. Hale's first name. She had also given us the order of events. The medication came first. Derek and the papers came after. I said nothing. The silence did the work. Vanessa set the glass down and asked whether I was recording her. You asked for this meeting. Her expression changed. She said she had only been guessing about the medication. Then she claimed Derek handled the decisions without her. A moment later, she insisted Dr. Hale never told her what he gave Dad. When I asked about Sophie entering the house, Vanessa said her daughter acted alone. Then she said Sophie had only followed Derek's instructions. Every new version damaged the one before it. Vanessa finally pushed the agreement toward me again. She said I was letting strangers turn Dad's death into a criminal case. She said the family could still settle everything quietly. I did not touch the paper. She stood and gathered her purse. At the door, she turned back. Your father chose me because you were never there." The words landed where she intended. I had been absent. Dad had failed me, and I had responded by building a life far away from him. None of that was simple, but distance was not permission. "Maybe he failed me," I said. "That still did not give you the right to take away his choices." Vanessa stared at me for a few seconds, then left. There was a time when I believed protecting Dad's memory meant forgiving everything he had done. I was wrong. You can tell the truth about someone's failures and still refuse to let another person exploit them. The investigator reviewed the recording that afternoon. Vanessa's statements were enough to widen the investigation and question everyone involved about the timing of the medication and signatures. Derek learned she had named him. Dr. Hale was told that his records were under review. Sophie discovered her mother had blamed her for entering the house. By nightfall, Derek tried to move files from his company server. He also booked a flight out of state. Around the same time, Dr. Hale called his attorney and offered to cooperate. Greed had held them together for years. One recording was enough to make each of them wonder who would betray the others first. They turned on each other. Derek moved first. Less than 3 hours after Vanessa left the conference room, he logged into his company server from a private laptop. He tried to delete client files, move money into a separate account, and erase messages connected to Dad's trust. He also booked a flight out of Virginia. Then he called a former employee and told him to destroy old paper records. The problem was that his company had already received a legal notice ordering every file to be preserved. That meant each login was recorded. Every deleted folder created a recovery log. Every attempted transfer left a timestamp. Derek had spent years believing numbers could hide people. In the end, the numbers described him better than any witness could. He was arrested in a parking lot near the airport while handing a small storage device to someone he once employed. There was no chase, no dramatic struggle, just 2 investigators, a sealed evidence bag, and a man in an expensive coat realizing that the trail he trusted had turned against him. Dr. Hale responded differently. Through his attorney, he offered to cooperate in exchange for consideration at sentencing. His statement took several hours. He admitted that he never performed a full capacity evaluation on Dad. Some days, he watched him for less than 10 minutes before signing forms that said Dad understood complex financial decisions. He knew the medication could affect memory and judgment. He adjusted the timing of those medications after Vanessa complained that Dad became restless before Derek arrived. He left out observations that would have shown confusion. He accepted payments from Derek's company under the label of consulting fees. Then he admitted that he had done a similar favor in Robert Mercer's case. Dr. Hale tried to explain himself. He had debts. Vanessa knew about mistakes from earlier in his career. He feared losing his practice. Fear can explain why someone makes a bad choice. It does not erase the person who pays for that choice. Each time Dr. Hale signed his name, he protected his own life by taking choice away from a sick man. Sophie also began protecting herself. She claimed she never knew the transfers were illegal. She said she followed her mother's instructions and believed the flash drive held private family material. She blamed Derek for telling her to take the black drive. She described every payment she received as a gift. The camera told a different story. "If the drive is gone, they don't have a case." Those were her words. Her messages showed that she had followed the progress of the transfers. She asked when the insurance beneficiary would be changed. She knew Dad was confused. One message made me put the phone down. Sophie joked that he kept asking for me like a child who had forgotten he had already been abandoned. She had not simply trusted her mother. She had understood enough to know that a weak man was being kept away from his daughter, and she had chosen to benefit from it. When Vanessa learned that Derek, Dr. Hale, and Sophie were all shifting blame toward her, she began to unravel. She threatened the former nurse. She deleted old posts. She tried to move personal assets. She called me from 3 different numbers. Some messages asked me to forgive her. Others accused me of destroying the family. I sent everyone to Naomi without responding. There had been a time when I imagined Vanessa begging. I thought it would feel like justice. When it happened, I felt no victory. I only saw a woman finally living inside the fear she had created for everyone else. The case did not end with those statements. There were subpoenas, signature reviews, data examinations, and interviews with the nursing staff. Investigators reopened the Mercer records. Attorneys argued over whether the recording from the conference room could be used. Dr. Hale's cooperation agreement took weeks to complete. Months passed before the indictments were announced. I returned to work part-time, then requested leave when depositions and hearings required me to be home. Justice did not arrive in one clean moment. It came through hundreds of pages, long silences, and weeks when no one called with news. By then, I had stopped measuring success by how frightened Vanessa sounded. I did not need to watch handcuffs close around anyone's wrists. I needed the public record to say what happened to Dad. For the first time, that truth mattered more to me than revenge ever had. 14 months after he died, the final sentencing hearing was scheduled. That morning, before I entered the courthouse, a jeweler handed me a small velvet box. Inside was my mother's pearl hair clip. He told me the repairs would always be visible. I asked him not to hide them. I did not want it to pretend it had never been broken. What my father left behind, 14 months after Dad died, I walked into the courtroom wearing my mother's repaired pearl hair clip. The joins in the metal were still visible. 2 pearls had been replaced. I was glad. Some things do not need to look untouched in order to be whole. The sentencing took most of the morning. Vanessa received a long prison term for wire fraud, conspiracy, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and obstruction. Derek was sentenced for fraud, money laundering, and destroying evidence. He was also ordered to surrender property tied to the transfers. Dr. Hale received less time because he cooperated, but he lost his medical license permanently. Sophie was held responsible for the break-in, destroying evidence, and her role in several transactions. The judge also ruled that the letter presented as Dad's final wishes had no legal value. The public record was corrected. Dad had not knowingly chosen to cut me out while fully aware of what he was signing. Those documents had been created while his ability to understand them was deeply compromised. The Mercer family finally heard that their concerns had not been bitterness or greed. There had been a pattern. When the judge finished, the courtroom did not erupt. Nothing inside me suddenly became painless. I only felt quiet. For the first time, an official record had said what Dad could no longer say for himself. A large portion of the money was recovered. Some had already been spent, but enough remained to give us a choice. I did not keep all of it. I already had a career, a steady income, health insurance, and a life built without depending on Dad's estate. I did not need his money to prove that I had been his daughter. Because I could support myself, I was free to ask a different question. What could this money do now? The recovered assets were placed into a foundation with 3 purposes. The first was an architecture scholarship for students with talent but little financial support. The second provided legal help to families who suspected an older relative was being isolated or financially exploited. The third trained nurses, social workers, and care staff to recognize warning signs, blocked calls, sudden changes in documents, unusual visitors, medication given before important decisions. Dad had spent his life designing buildings. It felt right that what remained of his work would help other people find a way out before every door was closed. Several months later, we opened a small architecture center in Virginia Beach. One gallery carried my mother's name. Dad's original drawings hung along the walls. His first construction hammer rested in a glass case. Nearby was an old photograph of my mother, wearing the same pearl hair clip pinned above my ear. We displayed the letter Dad never sent me. We did not turn his life into a perfect story. The introduction described him as a gifted architect and a complicated father. It acknowledged that he failed to protect his family. It also said that, near the end, he tried to preserve enough truth for someone else to act. Honoring the dead does not require erasing what they did wrong. Sometimes the most honest way to remember someone is to include where they failed and what they tried to repair before time ran out. Gloria stood beside me at the opening. She had cared for me after my mother died. She believed me when others accepted Vanessa's version. She kept memories no one else thought mattered. She never asked for money or recognition. She simply stayed. Naomi was there. So was Lena. Emily Mercer stood near the scholarship display. None of them shared my blood. All of them had chosen to stand beside me when doing so was inconvenient. That was when I understood that family is not created by a last name, a will, or a place at a holiday table. Family is revealed by who remains when loving you costs them something. After everyone left, I returned to the gallery alone. I rested my hand on Dad's old drafting table. "I told the truth, Dad," I said. "All of it. The truth about Vanessa, the papers, the ways he failed me, and the effort he made at the end." I never announced that I had forgiven him completely. Forgiveness was not a clean door that opened once and stayed open forever. But I no longer needed anger to protect me. Its cracks did not make the hair clip less valuable. They proved that someone had tried to destroy it and failed. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is where you observe, protect the evidence, and wait until the truth is strong enough to stand without you shouting. How satisfied were you with the way I handled the truth about my father and my stepmother? Rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. And tell me honestly, would you have stayed quiet and gathered the evidence, or confronted them the moment you discovered what they had done? What do you think about her decision? Would you have handled anything differently if you had been in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story gave you something to think about, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe so you do not miss the stories still to come. I will see you in the next story. We are Honor Family Radio, using stories to walk beside you through the years and to help you find peace, courage, and strength within yourself again.